The squeak of Lenore's expensive running shoes on the polished floorboards used to be a sound I associated with her commitment, her drive. Now, hearing them echo from the hallway as she returned, flushed and bright-eyed, from another late session at Peak Performance Fitness, it felt different. It felt like a closing door, each squeak sealing me out, pushing me further away from the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had spent 23 years building a life beside. It wasn't just the frequency, though that had ramped up significantly over the past 6 months, from 3 times a week to nearly every evening. It was the change in her, a vibrancy that seemed almost artificial when directed my way, yet fiercely guarded. "Long workout?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral as she dropped her sleek gym bag by the stairs. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to read a report, the words swimming meaninglessly before my eyes. Lenore pulled the elastic band from her high ponytail, shaking her dark hair loose. "Brutal spin class," she replied, stretching her arms above her head. "Absolutely wiped." She offered a quick, tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the same smile she'd been giving me for weeks. It was like a mask, hastily put on, hiding something I couldn't yet name but felt deep in my bones. We were 52, an age where comfortable routines often replace youthful passions. I'd thought we were navigating it well, settling into a rhythm of shared quiet evenings, planning future travels, enjoying the fruits of decades of hard work. I ran a small consulting firm, demanding but manageable. Lenore had scaled back her marketing career a few years ago, finding renewed purpose, she'd said, in health and wellness. The gym became her sanctuary, her new project. At first I'd been supportive, even proud. It was good to see her energized, focused. But the focus had shifted, sharpened into something exclusive, something that didn't seem to include me. Her gym bag sat there, innocuously black and gray, yet it felt like a barrier between us. I remembered buying it for her last Christmas, thinking it symbolized her dedication. Now it felt like a container of secrets. My gaze lingered on it. She'd become fiercely protective of her phone lately, too, always screened down, silenced notifications, blinking like coded messages I wasn't privy to. Conversations about her day, once detailed, became vague summaries. Good workout. Caught up with some people. Just tired. The unease had started subtly. A comment from a mutual friend, Patricia, who also went to Peak Performance. "Haven't seen Lenore in the morning classes for ages," she'd remarked casually over coffee. "Does she only go in the evenings now?" "Yeah, seems that way," I'd replied, trying to sound nonchalant, though a small knot tightened in my stomach. Lenore had always preferred morning workouts. The shift to evenings coincided with her increased intensity, she'd explained. More advanced classes, personal training sessions she insisted on paying for herself from an account I didn't track closely. That night, after Lenore had showered and retreated to the spare room, her new habit, claiming she didn't want to disturb my sleep with her early wake-up for meditation, I found myself staring at that gym bag again. It was slightly unzipped. An illogical, gnawing curiosity propelled me forward. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mixture of guilt and dread washing over me. This felt wrong, a violation of the trust I desperately wanted to believe still existed. But the alternative, the growing chasm of unspoken questions and gnawing suspicion, felt worse. I knelt beside the bag, my hand trembling slightly as I reached inside. Water bottle, towel, spare socks, headphones, the usual clutter. Then my fingers brushed against something small, hard-edged, tucked into a side pocket. It wasn't her usual membership card or locker key. I pulled it out. It was a hotel key card, sleek, anonymous plastic, bearing the logo of the Cypress Inn, a boutique hotel located less than a mile from Peak Performance Fitness. My breath hitched. There were a dozen innocent explanations. My mind scrambled to find them. A work conference gift? A friend staying there? But the Cypress Inn wasn't a conference hotel, and none of our friends lived out of town. And why keep it hidden in a gym bag pocket? I stood up slowly, the plastic cool against my palm, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. The squeak of her shoes echoed in my memory, no longer a sound of dedication, but a rhythm marking time spent somewhere else, with someone else. The key card felt heavy, like a verdict delivered before the trial had even begun. The vibrant glow she carried home from the gym wasn't just sweat and endorphins. It was the flush of something else entirely, something secret and stolen. The closing door, I felt, wasn't just figurative. It was the swipe of a key card, granting access to a life I had no part in, a life built on the ruins of ours. The foundation of 23 years felt like it was crumbling to dust right under my feet. I replaced the key card, tucking it back into the side pocket exactly as I'd found it. My movements felt robotic, detached. Touching her bag now felt like handling something contaminated. I retreated to the living room, sinking back into the armchair, the report I'd been pretending to read lying forgotten on my lap. The silence of the house pressed in, amplifying the frantic thrumming in my ears. The Cypress Inn, less than a mile from Peak Performance. How many evenings had ended not with a brutal spin class, but there? How long had this charade been playing out under the guise of self-improvement? Every memory of the past 6 months replayed itself, now cast in a harsh, unforgiving light. Her sudden insistence on privacy, the phone angled away, the vague answers, the late nights, the separate room. Each instance, previously dismissed or rationalized, now clicked into place like tumblers in a lock, revealing a pattern I'd been too trusting, or perhaps too afraid, to see. The vibrancy I'd noticed wasn't newfound energy. It was the stolen energy of a secret life. The distance wasn't just the natural drift of a long marriage. It was a deliberate wall she had constructed, brick by painstaking brick. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay awake on the sofa, staring into the darkness. The hotel key card burned into my mind's eye. Was it someone I knew? Someone from the gym? Did it matter? The betrayal felt absolute, regardless of the other person's identity. It was the calculated deception, the sustained lie woven into the fabric of our daily lives that cut the deepest. 23 years, shared dreams, weathered storms, raised 2 children who were now building lives of their own. Had it all been building towards this hollow endpoint? The next few days passed in a haze of forced normalcy. I went to work, managed my team, sat through meetings, but my mind was elsewhere, caught in a loop of suspicion and sorrow. I watched Lenore across the breakfast table, searching her face for clues, for some flicker of the woman I had married. But all I saw was the practiced mask, the cheerful efficiency that now felt like a performance. When she left for the gym each evening, dressed in expensive athletic wear, her bag slung over her shoulder, the casual "see you later" felt like a twist of the knife. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't check her bag again. The key card had been enough. Knowing the how or the who felt secondary to the devastating what. The turning point came unexpectedly during a quiet Sunday dinner. Lenore was talking about plans for redecorating the guest room, the room she now slept in. Maybe a softer blue, she mused, swirling wine in her glass. Something calming. Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in a wave of profound weariness. The charade felt suffocating, pointless. I put down my fork, the clink loud in the sudden silence. "Lenore," I began, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through her decorating plans. "We need to talk about the Cypress Inn." Her hand froze mid-swirl. The color drained from her face, leaving the cheerful mask to crumble, revealing the raw panic beneath. Her eyes darted towards me, wide and startled. The Cypress Inn?" she stammered, attempting confusion. "What are you talking about?" "The key card, Lenore. The one you keep in your gym bag." Silence. Thick, heavy, undeniable. She didn't try to bluff further. Her gaze dropped to her plate, her shoulders slumping slightly. The fight seemed to drain out of her in an instant, replaced by a vulnerability I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. It wasn't the vulnerability of remorse, though, not yet. It felt more like the shock of being caught. "How long?" I asked, the question hanging between us, heavy with the weight of unspoken months. She wouldn't meet my eyes. 6 months, she whispered, barely audible. Maybe a little longer. 6 months of lies, 6 months of shared meals, conversations, touches, all layered over this fundamental deceit. 6 months of her coming home flushed from seeing him, not from exercise. The pain was a physical ache in my chest. "Who?" The question felt necessary, though I dreaded the answer. She finally looked up, her eyes glistening, but her expression was strangely defiant. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," I said, my voice low. "It matters that you chose this, that you kept choosing it every day while living here with me." She took a shaky breath. "It's Michael, from the gym, the trainer." Michael, the one she'd mentioned helped her with her form, the one whose session she paid for separately. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. "I didn't plan for it to happen," she continued, the words tumbling out now, a torrent of justifications. "It just started. We connected. He understood me, listened to me in a way." She trailed off, perhaps realizing how hollow the words sounded. "In a way I didn't?" I finished for her, the bitterness sharp on my tongue. Or was it just easier to find connection somewhere else than to try and fix what we had, what we might have lost? "It wasn't about fixing anything," she said, a defensive edge creeping back into her voice. "It was about feeling alive again, feeling seen." Feeling seen while making me invisible. The irony was brutal. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scraping sound harsh against the floor. The appetite I hadn't had was completely gone now. "I think," I said, standing up, the decision forming even as I spoke, "that you need to find somewhere else to feel alive, Lenore. Somewhere you can be seen." Her head snapped up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over. I can't live like this. I can't live with the knowledge of this deception, with the person you've become." The finality in my own voice surprised me, yet it felt absolute. There was no room for negotiation, no path back to what we were. That landscape had been irrevocably altered. She stared at me, her expression shifting from panic to disbelief, then to a flicker of anger. Just like that? 23 years, and you're throwing it away? I'm not the one who threw it away, Lenore, I replied, the weariness returning, heavier than before. You made that choice 6 months ago, every time you went to that hotel, instead of coming home. Tears finally spilled over, tracing paths down her cheeks. They weren't tears of remorse, I realized, but tears of loss, the loss of her comfortable life, her safety net. I felt a pang, not of pity, but of profound sadness for the wreckage she had made of everything, including herself. You should pack your things, I said quietly, turning away. I'll sleep on the sofa tonight. You can stay in the guest room until you figure things out, but I want you gone by the end of the week. Walking out of the dining room felt like stepping out of a long, suffocating fog. There was no relief, not yet, only a stark, aching clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in grief and the daunting task of rebuilding a life I hadn't anticipated living alone. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The air was cold, sharp, but it was real. The weeks that followed were a blur of logistical arrangements and quiet goodbyes. Lenore moved out, taking her vibrant workout clothes, her sleek gym bag, and the suffocating weight of her secrets with her. The house felt cavernous, echoing with the absence of her presence, but also lighter, freed from the tension that had permeated every room. I didn't seek out details about her life with Michael. I didn't need to. My focus shifted inward towards navigating the landscape of my own grief and figuring out who I was without the defining label of husband that had shaped my identity for over 2 decades. Some days were harder than others, filled with waves of sadness or anger, triggered by a song on the radio, a familiar scent, or the sight of couples walking hand in hand. I started walking long walks in the evenings, not to the gym, but through parks and quiet neighborhoods. The rhythm of my steps became a form of meditation, a way to process the tangled emotions. I reconnected with old friends, spent more time with our children, who were navigating their own complex feelings about their mother's actions with surprising maturity. One crisp autumn evening, months later, I found myself standing outside the Cypress Inn. I hadn't planned to come here, my walk had simply led me this way. The lights glowed warmly in the windows, suggesting intimacy and escape. I thought about Lenore and Michael, hidden away in one of those rooms, believing their secrets were safe. I felt a flicker of the old pain, but it was duller now, less consuming. It was being replaced by something else, a quiet resolve. Her betrayal had shattered the life I knew, but it hadn't shattered me. It had forced me onto a different path, one I hadn't chosen, but was now determined to walk with my head held high. The foundation of our marriage had crumbled, yes, but I realized I could build a new foundation, one based on honesty, self-respect, and the quiet strength I was rediscovering within myself. Turning away from the hotel, I walked towards home, towards the quiet house that was slowly beginning to feel like my own again. The future was still uncertain, but it was mine to shape. The squeak of running shoes on polished floors no longer haunted my thoughts. Instead, I listened to the sound of my own steady footsteps on the pavement, moving forward, one step at a time. The end of that chapter wasn't the end of my story. It was simply the beginning of a new one. Time didn't exactly heal the wound, not completely. It was more like scar tissue formed over it, tough, protective, a permanent reminder of the injury, but no longer raw and bleeding. The first year after Lenore left was the hardest. Holidays felt hollow. Anniversaries were days to simply get through, and the house sometimes felt oppressively quiet. There were moments, usually late at night or early in the morning, when the ghost of our shared life would flicker at the edges of my awareness, bringing a familiar ache. But slowly, incrementally, things shifted. The quiet house began to feel less empty and more peaceful. I filled the silence not with noise but with intention. I rediscovered my love for jazz, letting the complex melodies fill the evenings. I started cooking again, not just functional meals, but experimenting with recipes, finding a simple satisfaction in creating something nourishing for myself. My consulting work, once just a backdrop, became more engaging as I poured my energy into projects, finding a renewed sense of purpose in problem-solving and strategy. My relationship with our kids, Emily and Ben, deepened. They were adults, navigating their own lives, but the implosion of their parents' marriage forced us into new kinds of conversations. We talked honestly, sometimes awkwardly, about loss, disappointment, and resilience. I saw their pain regarding their mother's choices, but also their quiet support for me. We didn't badmouth Lenore, there was no need. The facts spoke for themselves. Instead, we focused on rebuilding our family dynamic on a new foundation of mutual respect and shared experiences, Sunday brunches, weekend hikes, simply checking in more often. I heard snippets about Lenore indirectly. Patricia, my friend from the gym, mentioned seeing her once or twice, still with Michael, the trainer. Apparently, their relationship hadn't lasted long after the initial dramatic exit. The thrill, it seemed, faded quickly when confronted with the mundane realities of building a life outside the stolen moments at the Cypress Inn. Last I heard, Michael had moved on to another client, another conquest, and Lenore was living in a small apartment across town working a lower-level marketing job. There was no satisfaction in hearing this, only a quiet affirmation that the choices we make have consequences, often far different from the ones we imagine in the heat of the moment. I felt a distant sort of pity, perhaps, but mostly indifference. Her life was hers to navigate. Mine was finally feeling like my own again. I never went back to peak performance fitness. The association was too strong, tainted by the memory of deception. Instead, I found a smaller, older gym on the other side of town, one without fancy juice bars or boutique classes. It had worn equipment, honest sweat, and people focused on their workouts, not on appearances. I started lifting weights again, something I hadn't done seriously since my 20s. There was a purity in the physical exertion, the simple equation of effort and result. Pushing against the weight felt like pushing back against the inertia of grief, building strength not just in my body, but in my resolve. One Saturday morning, about 18 months after Lenore had left, I was working in the garden, pruning the rose bushes she had always fussed over. The sun was warm on my back, the scent of damp earth rich in the air. It struck me then, quite suddenly, that I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology, wasn't waiting for the pain to completely disappear, wasn't waiting for life to feel normal again. This was normal now, different, quieter, marked by loss, but undeniably mine. The memory of the hotel key card, once a symbol of unbearable betrayal, now felt distant, like an artifact from another life. It no longer held the power to wound me. The pain had been real, the anger justified, the grief profound, but dwelling on the why she did it, why me, why us, felt like standing still. The more important question had become, what now? What now was this? A life rebuilt, piece by painstaking piece, a deeper connection with my children, a quiet satisfaction in my work and my simple routines, a newfound appreciation for solitude and the strength it could foster. I hadn't sought forgiveness for Lenore, nor did I feel the need to actively withhold it. She simply occupied a different space now, relegated to the past, a closed chapter in a book I was still writing. As I clipped away a dead branch from the rosebush, a cardinal landed on the fence nearby, a flash of brilliant red against the green. It tilted its head, sang a brief, clear note, and flew off. I watched it go, a small, unexpected moment of beauty, and in that moment I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me, quiet and unassuming, like the morning sun warming my skin. The path forward wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it, acknowledging the scars, and choosing to live fully in the present, open to whatever came next. The house wasn't empty. It was simply waiting for new memories to be made. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to make them. Another year turned, marked by the quiet rhythm of seasons changing outside my window. The sharp edges of grief had softened further, smoothed by the passage of time and the deliberate construction of this new life. The house no longer felt like a space defined by absence, but rather a space filled with my own presence, my own routines, my own choices. The jazz collection continued to grow, the low, smooth notes often filling the evenings as I read or sketched out plans for a new consulting project. The bookshelves were crowded with histories and biographies, books I wanted to explore, and the garden, while perhaps not as meticulously kept as when Lenore oversaw it, thrived under my admittedly less expert but consistent care. It felt lived in, comfortable, mine. My children, Emily and Ben, remained steady points of connection. Emily visited often, sometimes bringing her easygoing partner, David, other times just dropping by herself for coffee and conversation on a Saturday morning. Ben, busy with his career in the city, called regularly, our conversations shifting comfortably from parental guidance to the easy rapport of two adults sharing their lives, their challenges, their small victories. We rarely spoke of Lenore anymore. Her name wasn't a taboo subject. It just wasn't often relevant to our present lives. Her absence had become a quiet, accepted fact, like a piece of furniture removed so long ago you barely register the empty space. I knew, through a brief, unavoidable update from Emily, who had bumped into her unexpectedly, that Lenore was still working, still living alone in the small apartment across town. The relationship with Michael, the trainer, had apparently fizzled out within months of her leaving me, the stark reality proving far less appealing than the clandestine excitement. There was no triumph in hearing this news, no vindictive pleasure, merely a quiet, detached acknowledgement. Choices have ripples, consequences that spread outwards, often in unpredictable ways. Her choices had led her down one road. The immediate consequences had forced me onto another, and I had learned slowly but surely how to navigate it, even find unexpected moments of beauty and contentment along its winding path. I continued my workouts at the old, no-frills gym, The simple effort, the burn in my muscles, the quiet camaraderie with the other regulars, it grounded me. Sometimes, after a Saturday morning session, a few of us would grab coffee at the worn, comfortable diner down the street. One of the regulars, a woman named Carol, a recently retired history teacher with a wonderfully dry wit and kind, intelligent eyes, often joined us. We discovered a shared love for old movies and historical novels. We talked easily about books, local events, the small joys and frustrations of everyday life. There was no pressure in those conversations, no unspoken expectations, just the simple pleasure of connection, of shared perspective. It wasn't romance, not necessarily, though the thought wasn't unwelcome should it arise naturally. More importantly, it was a reminder that life continued to offer possibilities, small moments of shared humanity, easy laughter, even after profound disruption. It felt good, wholesome, a quiet sign that the world hadn't ended. It had just changed shape. Sitting on my porch one cool evening, a book resting on my lap, watching the fireflies begin their hesitant dance in the twilight, the feeling was starkly different from those agonizing nights years ago. The visceral ache of betrayal was gone, replaced by a quiet, settled gratitude. Gratitude for my children, for my health, for the resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The betrayal had been a devastating storm, tearing through the carefully constructed landscape of my life, leveling familiar structures and leaving behind wreckage. But storms, however fierce, eventually pass, and in their wake, if you look closely enough, there's often fertile ground, an opportunity to rebuild. Not always exactly what was there before, perhaps never exactly the same, but maybe something different, something informed by the experience, something stronger in the places where it was broken. I had learned that my worth wasn't intrinsically tied to someone else's fidelity or lack thereof. I learned that resilience isn't about building walls to avoid pain, but about learning how to walk through it, sometimes crawl through it, and keep moving forward. Peace, I discovered, wasn't the absence of trouble or the erasure of painful memories, but the quiet, internal strength found in navigating life's inevitable turbulence. The squeak of expensive running shoes on polished floors, the image of a sleek hotel keycard, they were just memories now, like faded photographs from a distant past, stripped of their power to inflict fresh wounds. My life was no longer defined by what Lenore had done to me, but by how I had chosen to live after. And I was choosing to live fully, quietly, purposefully, finally, blessedly, at peace. The porch swing creaked gently as I shifted my weight, the rhythm of familiar comfort. The fireflies were putting on a real show now, tiny sparks illuminating the deepening dusk. It was hard to believe this tranquil scene occupied the same space where, just a few years prior, my world had felt like it was collapsing inward, consumed by suspicion and the eventual, shattering confirmation of Lenore's betrayal. The contrast was stark. The frantic energy, the gnawing anxiety, the sleepless nights spent dissecting every word, every glance. They felt like they belonged to a different man, a different lifetime. That man had been desperate to hold on to something that was already irrevocably broken. This man, the one sitting here now, understood that some things cannot, and perhaps should not, be salvaged. A comfortable silence settled around me, punctuated only by the chirp of crickets and the distant hum of the city. My book lay closed on the small table beside me. Tonight, the quiet observation felt more nourishing than fiction. I thought briefly of Carol, the retired teacher from the gym. We'd planned to catch an outdoor classic film screening in the park next weekend. It wasn't a date, not officially, but it felt nice, easy, uncomplicated. A small step towards something new, perhaps, taken without pressure or expectation. The journey hadn't been easy. Rebuilding after such a deep betrayal is slow work, often involving 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But looking around at the life I had carefully reassembled, the comfortable home, the strong bonds with my children, the quiet satisfaction in my work, the tentative reopening to new connections, I felt a deep, abiding sense of having weathered the storm. Lenore's actions, born of her own choices and perhaps her own unhappiness, had undeniably caused immense pain. But they no longer defined my present or dictated my future. The power she held over my emotional landscape had dissolved, not through confrontation or revenge, but through the quiet, persistent act of reclaiming my own life, my own peace. The most crucial lesson, I suppose, was realizing that true strength wasn't about preventing the blows life inevitably delivers, but about how you choose to get back up afterwards. It's about finding your footing on shaken ground, tending to your wounds, and choosing, day by day, to keep walking forward, focusing not on the wreckage behind, but on the path ahead, however uncertain it may seem. A cool breeze rustled the leaves in the oak tree overhead. I took a slow, deep breath, inhaling the scent of night-blooming jasmine from the neighbor's yard. The future remained unwritten, as it always does, but for the first time since the foundations were rocked, it felt less like a threat and more like an open possibility. And that, I realized with a quiet sense of clarity, was enough. It was more than enough.